afternoon, Simon. It's a great pleasure to talk with you on behalf of the Club France Initiative. Let me introduce you. Simon ANHOLT, you are an independent policy advisor. For the past 20 years, you have worked for governments around the world on issues such as international engagement, public diplomacy, and place branding. You founded the Good Country Index, the Global Leader Index, and the Global Vote. We will go deeper into this during the interview. You have written 6 books, and your last one, The Good Country Equation, How We Can Repair the World in One Generation, was published in October 2020. You founded an academic journal called Place Branding and Public Diplomacy. Last but not least, your 2014 TED Talk in Berlin, on which country does the most good for the world, got more than 7 million views, the most ever watched on government issues. Simon, thank you very much. We have a lot to learn from you. Let's start with the first question. Can you give us your opinion on the state of the French soft power and image in terms of the Good Country Index?
Thank you for that, Vincent, and thank you for the very kind introduction. I feel exhausted hearing about all of the things I've done. It's about time I took a holiday. So let me start by refusing to answer your question. I am not very keen on the idea of soft power. It's not a phrase I use very often myself. I do have great admiration for Professor Nye, the inventor of this concept, but I think it's probably long overdue for an overhaul. The problem with soft power is that it's still the language of power. It's still about ways in which nations can achieve ascendancy or primacy over each other. And I think this is the main problem in the world. As long as nations are trying to achieve ascendancy over each other, we are all going to lose. So I think we very urgently need to change the culture of governance worldwide from fundamentally competitive to fundamentally collaborative. And then we stop thinking about soft power or hard power or winning or losing. We start thinking about how we can work together to help ourselves and help each other. It's a very substantial change. Now, having said all that, the concept of countries exerting a certain attraction in the world is very real, and it's very worth trying to measure, and it is very significant. France, of course, is a soft power superpower. It is in many ways, par excellence, in the modern age, a soft power nation. Because it doesn't exert very much hard power. Sure, it's a nuclear power, but we're not expecting France to start bombing North Korea anytime soon. France's great strengths are in its attraction. It has extraordinary culture, extraordinary people, extraordinary cuisine, extraordinary landscape, extraordinary language. I'm telling you things you already know. You asked about the Good Country Index. The Good Country Index attempts to measure what every country on earth contributes to the world outside its own borders. So in this respect, it's very different from every other country ranking. All the other country rankings measure performance in some degree domestically. So how transparent are you? How productive are you? How progressive are you? How clean are you, or whatever? The Good Country Index asks how much you do for the rest of civilization, for the rest of humanity and the planet. And I think that this is a really important question to be asking in the 21st century, the age of global challenges, because we will only resolve the global challenges like climate change or pandemics if we think outside our own borders as well as inside our borders. So what I call the gold standard of good governance is a country that effectively harmonizes its domestic and its international responsibilities. It does the right thing for its own people and does the right thing for as many other people as possible. So France does well. In the Good Country Index, it ranks 7th overall. So that means it's one of the countries that contributes most to the rest of the world. I don't know whether you call that soft power. I call that being a good country. France, according to the index, is a good country.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Another very relevant tool for our work is the Global Leader Index. Can you tell us how the goodest and ungoodest leaders can have an impact on the global stage?
The Good Leader Index performs exactly the same function as the Good Country Index, but looking at individual policymakers, the leaders of countries, but sometimes the leaders of organizations, even companies, rather than the country overall. It's not based on data, it's based on my own opinion. So this is an editorial opinion in the case of the Good Leader Index. What that tries to do is to draw people's attention to the idea that a good leader is not just somebody who does the right thing for his or her own population. That's the old idea. The modern idea should be asking not how well is this country doing, but how much is this country doing? And one of the things I always remind governments in my work as a policy advisor is when you become the president or the prime minister of a country, you join the team that runs the planet. Yeah, this idea of America first, well, there's nothing very scandalous about Trump saying America first. It's a statement of the obvious. Of course, if you're elected to be the president of a country, you have to treat your own citizens' interests as a priority. But what I didn't like about Trump's approach was the idea that America first means everybody else must come last. This is a very depressing and very old-fashioned and very impoverished view, I think, of governance. And tragic that an American president should be preaching that particular gospel, because America, of all countries, ever since Alexis de Tocqueville first observed it, was the country that seemed to understand that by helping other countries to achieve their own objectives, it could ultimately achieve its own objectives more effectively. That Donald Trump somehow wasn't aware of this or had forgotten it is actually quite surprising after all of these years. So the Good Leader Index basically ranks leaders on that scale. How much are you doing for the world outside your borders at the same time? The goodest leader is the one that achieves that mixture most effectively. And I know why you asked the question, by the way. It's because Mr. Macron was featured as the ungoodest leader a few months ago.
Exactly.
And that was as a result of the terrible assassination of the unfortunate school teacher and Macron's public response to it, which, in my opinion, was geared more than necessary towards pleasing public opinion in France, whilst at the same time risking creating more anti-Muslim sentiment internationally and in France as well. So he's normally a very, very sure-footed player. I think on that occasion, he didn't play it very well. I think he was risking creating an international disturbance for the sake of reassuring some domestic electors.
Actually, we watched the protestation in different countries around the world, so you're probably true. Huh? So next question. So if you had to advise the French government, so we are not talking about soft power because you already said what you think about this concept, but what would you recommend to be a good country? I mean, according to you, it seems that being a good country, it's doing good, it's acting good, it's the most important value added. So what we can do to achieve that?
Well, the fundamental message of my most recent book, The Good Country Equation, is based on some research which I've been conducting for the last 20 years, which tries to identify what is the recipe for economic progress in a country. How do some countries become rich and successful and more stable and more peaceful faster than others? And it turns out that one of the most significant factors in that is the quality of the country's image. If it is highly regarded and respected by the rest of the world, then it automatically means you get more foreign investment, you get more tourism, more people buy your products and services. It's good for trade, it's good for diplomacy. So it's just like in the corporate sector. If your product has a good, powerful brand image, then you will make more money. It turns out through my research, the same identical fact is true for countries. If you as a country have a good image, you will make more money. And so obviously the next question is, how do you get a good image? Where does that come from? And the answer is not from propaganda. Many countries have wasted an enormous amount of money telling everybody how wonderful they are. And guess what? Nobody's listening. They're just not interested. It simply doesn't work. Propaganda is possible if you're Stalin or Goebbels or Kim Jong-un and you're operating on your own people. But internationally, it doesn't work. It never has, and it never will. No. What the research shows very clearly is that the best way to achieve a good image is by contributing to the world outside your border, so that people feel glad that your country exists. And so if France wants to benefit from a good image, if it wants more trade, more tourism, more foreign investment, then it must be associated in people's minds with being a good neighbor, a good international player, not just in Europe, but worldwide. Do people feel glad that France exists? Not just because of its assets of culture and history and landscape and cuisine, but because of the way it behaves in the international domain. So my answer to the French government, if they asked me that question, would be exactly the same answer that I give to every government. Decide what you can do to contribute to the improvement of humanity and the planet at the same time as improving things in your own country. Stick to that for a generation, and you will earn a better reputation. It's absolutely inevitable. And as you earn a better reputation, you will improve your trading figures.
Okay. Maybe, I know we are running out of time, but maybe I would like to ask you a last question. Being a good country basically also means not being selfish. Yeah. But how we can achieve that in a moment where liberal values are challenged by populist movement and also by a new global order?
Well, again, it's a really good question. This is another reason why this mysterious element in the equation of national image, is very important. Because one of the things that characterizes nationalistic, illiberal, inward-looking populations is that they want everybody else in the world to admire their country. They want to be respected. They want to be admired. They want to be feared even. And so it's part of the same equation. Even a very nationalistic, short-termist, populist, illiberal leader must understand that if he, because it's nearly always a he, wants to retain the admiration of the population, he has to improve the profile and the image of his country. Vladimir Putin spends quite a lot of his time trying to reassure the Russian people that thanks to Vladimir Vladimirovich, Russia is universally admired, feared, and respected. It's exactly the same principle. So the more a country does to earn that respect, the more the nationalist population will admire that particular leader. So the two things are really, really not opposed to each other. In a funny kind of way, it doesn't really matter what the politics is. Whether it's left-wing, right-wing, nationalist, or globalist, the same rules still apply. You cannot function effectively and productively in the international environment, whatever your aims are, without a level of respect and admiration from the rest of the international community. If you are a pariah, if you are ignored, if you are dismissed, if you are disrespected, then you can't achieve any of your aims, whatever those aims are. North Korea is the perfect example. As a result of being mistrusted by every other player in the international community, North Korea can't even feed its own population.
Very inspiring. Thank you very much, Simon. Thank you.
C'est un plaisir. So